Today is March the 7th, 2021. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program here in the library. With me is Fred Jonzen, currently the Trauma Regional Sales Manager for Stryker Company in California, a former professional basketball player, and a 2002 graduate of OSU, where he was a forward on the men's basketball team, number 12, if I remember correctly, and somewhat known as the Big Swede. Is that correct?
That's correct.
This interview is being recorded with Zencastr and will be part of our project we're calling the We Will Remember Promise Oral History project. So thank you for being here. By way of context, January 27th, 2001, a plane crashed carrying 10 men associated with the men's basketball program here at OSU, and no one survived that plane crash. At the time of the accident, Fred was a student athlete on the team and later was a member of the team travel task force. In the aftermath, the university and the cowboy community made a promise to always remember these 10 great individuals. Before we get to that day, though, Fred, let's learn a little bit about you. Start wherever you like.
Yeah, and first of all, thanks for having me, and excited to talk to you. And I think this is a great thing you're doing is to keep memories alive and keep history really alive. And so I think this is great. And yeah, I'm born and raised in Sweden, in a town called Uppsala, Sweden. And as everyone in Sweden, I played soccer growing up, and then turned out that I have tall parents, so I ended up being pretty tall. And my older sister, she's tall as well, and so she started playing basketball. And so when I was around 10 years old, I got into basketball, and since then it's just kind of been my life. And so a big part of that was I wanted to get to the NBA. That was a big dream. That was the goal growing up, and so I knew that coming to high school and college in the U.S. was a couple of stepping stones to that goal. And so I had the opportunity to come to Kansas City for my junior year of high school, and then went back to Sweden, finished high school in Sweden, and then got an offer to come to Stillwater and play for Coach Sutton at Oklahoma State. And so that's my backstory and how I kind of got to Oklahoma all the way from Sweden. So.
Okay, so when were you born? When?
I was born June 13th, 1978. So I was a little bit older than most my, I guess because I had to take an extra year of high school when I went back to Sweden because I didn't get credit for that year in Kansas City. So I graduated 2002, but I was 1 or 2 years older probably than everyone else at that time.
So when did you have your growth spurt?
I think I was always tall. I remember always being tall growing up. My mom she's about 5'10", 5'11". My dad's about 6'4", so I definitely have it in the family. But yeah, I was always tall. So basketball isn't a huge sport in Sweden, and so it wasn't a natural thing to just start playing basketball. But I can thank my sister for that.
Okay, and so what was the name of your high school?
So in Sweden, it was Katedralskolan, which means the cathedral school. So it's an very old historical school in Uppsala. And then when I went to Kansas City, I went to Shawnee Mission East, the Lancers, and Shawnee Mission in Prairie Village in Kansas.
How did you come to choose Kansas?
So my coach in Sweden had knew someone a Swedish guy who had played football in Kansas City. And so he ended up staying there. And so they stayed in touch. And then he somehow got connected with an AAU team in Kansas City. And we had, having a couple of guys that wanted to come over and play high school basketball, they gave us an opportunity to come over one summer. And we kind of toured around the U.S. and played some tournaments that summer, and then ended up staying for the full year basically as a foreign exchange student. And so it was nothing but just luck that led me to Kansas City.
Well, was it tough on your parents to bring you and drop you off, or did they put you on the plane and send you?
Yeah, no. So we went. My coach came with us that first trip, and so but yeah, but after that, it was just us. You know, we were 17 at the time, so we were a little bit older. But yeah, my parents already had one of my sisters. They had one daughter in that had been to California for a high school year, and then another one that was in California for college. So they were used to it by now.
And did you get a little bit of homesick?
I did. It was definitely it's you know, this is before the internet too, so everything is just written letters, and I remember, you know, writing letters, and they would arrive 1 or 2 weeks late. It was kind of it was a really the highlight of the day when the mail came, and you had a letter from friends and family and things like that. But definitely a little bit of an adjustment early on, but I still had a great time.
So there were, how many siblings do you have?
I have two older sisters.
Two older sisters. Okay. And or did had your parents gone to college, or were you guys the first?
So they had, so my they both went to university in Sweden. They actually
Okay.
met in Uppsala, my hometown, when they were university or college students. So Uppsala has it's probably, I think it's the biggest or the second biggest university in Sweden. So it's a big university town, and a lot of people come there to study for college. So my neither one of them are actually from that town. They moved from other cities just to study in that town or at that university, and so that's how they met.
So if you hadn't got into basketball, what were you planning to do as a plan B?
I don't think I had a plan B at that time because basketball really was with me from fourth or fifth grade and on, and you know, at that time you don't really think much about the future. But I when I ended up coming to Oklahoma State, I was really interested in, you know, from playing sports. I wanted to get into sports med and kind of study those things, and you know, potentially be a trainer or some kind of strength coach or something like that. I was really into that. But I remember my mom. She didn't say I couldn't do it, but she advised me that you know, it would be a great thing to get a business degree. You can do so many different things with a business degree. You can still go into sports med later if that's what you want. But so she kind of got me on that route, and that's why I ended up going into international business. Actually, was my degree at Oklahoma State. So,
What had been your favorite subject in high school?
oh, uh, that's a good question. I was not very good at art. I'll tell you that much. Art was not my strength. I always liked history, and uh, not a big fan of the science subjects, but yeah, history, any language, German. I studied German, and obviously English. We have to take English from fourth grade, so we learned English pretty early on, and then in seventh grade you have to pick German or Spanish. So I would say history or any kind of those languages.
I'm thinking with business, was math in there somewhere?
It's probably not early on. It was something that now, when I, you know, as a adults, is something that I'm really interested in. And so but yeah, I did always, when I think back of what I did, I mean, just like any kid, we're playing sports, we're out playing basketball, hockey, soccer, whatever it is, and you know, pretending to be the teams and kind of keeping track and playing a whole season, and so yeah, I had just, you know, standings of the soccer leagues that I was pretending to play in. So it was all about numbers. So I think I was always into numbers somehow.
Okay, so you were here in you came to the states. If I let's see, you started at OSU in 1998.
Yeah,
That sound right?
yeah.
Okay.
And I
So
came to Kansas. Yeah, I was in Kansas City 95 to 96. So that was my first year in the U.S. was 1995, and then went back to Sweden for 2 more years to finish high school, and then came back in 1998.
okay, before we get to OSU, what was your team NBA team that you like so well? Your favorite team? Did you have one?
I I mean, like everyone growing up in that era, Michael Jordan was, and Magic Johnson, and you know, those we we didn't get it. We didn't have access to games the way that we do today, and so we got to watch. Basically, um, you could buy these cassette tapes that they would send on a weekly basis, and it would be the game of the week, and it would always be, the Bulls or the Lakers or something like that. So I definitely was a big Jordan and Magic fan, but yeah, never really had one big team that I cheered for. Just a basketball fan in general.
Okay. Well, once you got to the U.S., did you go see a professional game?
Um, yes, my first game was that year in Kansas City, and it was spring break, and I got an opportunity to go with. So it was me and another my Swedish friend, Anders. His name was Jönzén as well, spelled a little bit different, but he stayed with a family who were actually pretty good friends with. Greg Popovich is the coach. He was a GM at the time for San Antonio Spurs, but now he's the coach, and so we got an opportunity to go to San Antonio over spring break with them,
Oh,
and that was my first game, was the Spurs against Golden State Warriors. So that was a great experience.
did you drive?
No, we flew down there.
I was
Yeah.
going to say you could have come through Oklahoma at
Oh,
that
I
point.
know. Yeah. No, we didn't. We the way I remember it, we flew, because otherwise I think I would have remembered that long of a trip.
Okay. Well, then let's get into how did Eddie Sutton come to find you, or how did you make that connection?
Yeah. So that first summer when I came and I played with the AEU team that I played on was a very talented team. It was one of the top teams in the country, actually. And so wherever we went, wherever we played, there was a lot of college coaches, a lot of exposure. And so I was fortunate enough to get to play in front of some of the top coaches, right? So, and then every summer, even though I went back to Sweden, every summer I would come back in the summertime to play with this AAU team. And so over the years, um, I started getting letters from college coaches, and yeah, they started recruiting me, and it was kind of all over the place. It was small schools, big schools. Uh, didn't really, I didn't really feel like I had one single school that was really on me until kind of that last summer. And so the way it worked back then is that last summer, and then you had a period in the fall that was, your signing period. And so uh, I played in Sweden at the time, and I didn't have time to really just go visit a lot of different schools. So I narrowed it down. I remember I narrowed it down to 5 schools, and they all came to Sweden. And so Coach Sutton brought his wife Patsy, and they actually ended up staying for a few days vacationing in Stockholm and Sweden. Uh, but then I decided, after those 5 visits, I decided on 2 schools that I was going to go visit, because we had a little bit of a break in our season. And so I decided on Oklahoma State and Marquette in Milwaukee. And to go back a little bit, one of my teammates in Kansas City, in Shawnee Mission East, his name is Michael Johnson. So he was a year ahead of me, and he was recruited, and he actually went to Oklahoma State on a basketball scholarship. And so he was already there, and because the connection with him, that's how I got to know Coach Sutton, and Coach Paul Graham was actually the assistant coach who recruited me. And then I went to visit Oklahoma State, like I said, and I went to visit Marquette. And after that trip, it was a done deal. I knew I wanted to come to Stillwater and play for Coach Sutton, and if you think of Marquette and Oklahoma State, they're so completely different types of schools. One is downtown Milwaukee, and the other one is in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And Marquette had historically, they had a fairly new coach, so it didn't have a lot of history with the coaching staff, whereas obviously Coach Sutton had been a successful coach for a long time, right? So there was pros and cons with both, for sure, but I definitely felt that Oklahoma State was the place to be, and I felt at home. And I think that year in Kansas City, just being in the Midwest and really enjoying my time in Kansas City, and it was only 4 hours away from Stillwater, I think that kind of made it feel a little bit better too, about coming back and having some friends, having some people that I knew in Kansas City. Didn't feel like I was going to a completely new place. So, but yeah, having that connection with Michael Johnson and just being close to Kansas City kind of put it all together.
And what was your first impression of campus when you came?
Well, it looked a lot different than it does now. I'll tell
It
you
does, yeah.
that. No, that feeling of just a college town, the typical U.S. college town, where you have a city of 40,000 people and 20,000 were college students, and I really enjoyed that, and this is also before there were any NBA teams, and before the Thunder was in Oklahoma City, right? So
Right.
it was OU and OSU, and that was it for the whole state of Oklahoma. And I really felt that, not just in Stillwater, but just as a state and whole. So it was a great experience.
Did you visit the library very often?
I did I did go there, and definitely had some study sessions there, and
Okay.
I was up there, not a lot, but I was definitely up there quite some time.
Okay, so where did you live your freshman year?
So I never actually lived in a dorm because I was a little bit older and I came from Sweden, and I don't remember all the ins and out about this, but they allowed me to actually live off campus. So I had I my freshman year I lived in an apartment right next to Gallagher Iba. It was on Duck Street, and I mean literally right there behind Eskimo Joe's, almost kind of in that area. So, and then my second year, just down the street, also on Duck Street, I lived two houses away from Garth Brooks' old house. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
so it was
Yeah,
about 2 3 houses down the
yeah.
street from that. So I walked to Gallagher Iba for practice every day. Walked to obviously class, and then my junior year is when I got the opportunity to move in with Nate Fleming, and how we kind of started that relationship. And he was a freshman my sophomore year, and then that next year I was a junior and he was now a sophomore, and so he was moving out of the dorms, and he had gotten a house off campus with a friend of his, who JC DeLeon, who was an OSU golfer from Tulsa, and he asked, they needed a third roommate, and he asked me if I wanted to live with them, and I thought about it for a while, and I said, okay, well, sure, let's do it. And so, great house. It was on University Circle, which is close to the library. It's right next to campus, basically on the west side. Uh, it's it's no longer, so I think the school actually bought up a few houses on that street, and it's now a parking lot because they've made some more buildings. So I actually just drove by there last month when I was there, and I think it's my neighbor's house is still there, but then where our house was is now a parking lot. And so, but I mean, great location. It's same thing. It was right on campus, right across the street from the Delt house, and yeah, close to everything. So great experience.
I'm thinking with three guys, who was in charge of cooking?
Uh, I remember Nate being a good cook. So, uh, and we also, we still had the possibility to go eat at the dorm and things like that. But yeah,
Right, right.
I definitely, it's funny thinking back, when you're in your early 20s, late, or 18, 19 years old, you can eat anything, and it doesn't, as long as you just exercise,
Yeah,
it doesn't matter, right? But I
right.
think back sometimes with the things we ate, it's like that it wouldn't fly now.
And then laundry.
Laundry, well, we did our own laundry. I know that Nate, because his parents live in Edmond, and so he would go home every now and then on weekends. But no, we had a laundry machine there, and we did our, it's funny. It's those things that you just, when you start living by yourself, you take care of yourself, and I was a little bit like that even before. When I lived in Kansas City, I was a foreign exchange student, but I lived with a single mom whose daughters had just gone off to college. It was just me and her, and so I really got to take care of myself, obviously, and she didn't want another teenager to take care of. So it was a good year for me to really grow up when I was 17 years old. So that was never a problem, really.
So a practical question, I guess, is you're so tall, which how does the bed fit? What, that type of thing. Yeah,
So
I'm
so
thinking a twin won't be big enough.
no. So I was given this house had two big bedrooms and then it had one small bedroom, and I was very just easy. They had already decided they want to live together. I didn't want to pay a whole lot in rent, and I took the smallest room in the house. And a funny story is that there was a Swedish golfer named Lotta. Can't remember her last name now, but she played on the women's golf team at Oklahoma State, and she's a little bit older than me, but she had actually lived in that house the year before. So it was her old room, and so when she moved out, everything was still there. So I I can't remember. I mean, I'm sure it was a twin bed, maybe a queen. I can't remember, but I've I've dealt with small and short beds my whole life, so
For a long time, yeah.
I think I got by.
So from that angle, you would have to walk by the library to get to
Yeah.
Gallagher, or at least come close to it.
Yeah, I think when we moved to that location, I think that I probably drove to Gallagher mostly for practice, but I would walk to on campus for classes every day. So it was more when I lived on more of the east side of campus that I could walk to Gallagher every day.
So when you were here then when they were renovating
Yep,
Gallagher,
yep.
and you still had practice in there while they were doing.
Yeah, we practiced a lot at the Colvin Center. Actually, I remember that
Okay.
there's that whole season leading up to the new stadium or the new arena opened up, uh, a couple of weeks before the plane crash. So it was January 20 or whenever conference play started that year, or end of December, maybe even. But um, so the November, December, all the non-conference games that season, we had to play on the road because we had nowhere to play. So we played neutral sites. We played in Tulsa. We played in Oklahoma City, and then we practiced. The majority of it was, at Colvin Center, or uh, we didn't have a practice. I'm trying to think. We had if because they part of that rebuild was that they added a practice court, right? And so it's right there in that lobby where the remember the 10 where the memorial is. And I think that might have finished before they actually completed the big stadium. So I think we had an opportunity to practice there quite a bit.
Okay. So that would get into 2000 then at that point.
Yeah.
Before we get into January 27th, though, let's talk a little bit about Nate.
Yep.
What else can you tell us? What did you guys do for fun when you weren't on the court?
Yeah. No, that's Nate. Like I said, he was a freshman my sophomore year, right? And so I got to know him, just like you get to know all your teammates. And I, but over the year, we obviously got closer and closer, which then led to him asking me if I wanted to live with him the following year. But it really wasn't until we actually started living together that I think we became very good friends, right? And so one thing about Nate, I feel like he was always obviously very well mannered. He was raised by his parents in a very good way. He was always very, very kind, and the way he talked and treated everyone. He still was very witty. He had humor. He was very uh, he was very competitive. He had played competitive sports in high school, so he played tennis, he played basketball, obviously, and been one of the bigger stars playing in high school basketball. So for him to, he probably could have gone to maybe a smaller school or smaller college and played in college scholarship and had a bigger role, but he wanted to come to, a big school as a walk-on. So I think it was a big adjustment for him to not be the star anymore, but to be just one of the guys, right? But that competitiveness still came out in practice every day, and I really, that's one thing I loved about him, is that he didn't want to just be a guy that everyone was pushing around or beating on, just because he was not as great of a player. he would go in there 100% all the time, and he really pushed you and made sure that you were playing up to the level that you needed to play, or otherwise he would beat you, right? And so um, it was great living with someone like that, because he also pushed you when, he got on me sometimes if I had a bad game. He would tell me, he would let me know, and it's like, oh, you're supposed to be a big time, NBA player. It's like, you can't play like that, and so he 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 was a motivator in a sense as well. But outside of basketball, I mean, Nate had a ton of friends. From, obviously there's a lot of students at Oklahoma State from Edmond, from high school, but I feel like he knew everyone, and so through him, I got to know a lot of people that I probably wouldn't have gotten to know anyway. So for me, in a sense, coming from Sweden, being an outsider, being on a basketball scholarship, really no ties to anything Stillwater, Oklahoma, anything like that. He was kind of a way into for me to get to know people that probably I wouldn't get to know otherwise. So, but yeah, I mean, Nate, he had a lot of talents. He, like we talked about, being a great cook too. But he played the guitar. He was into big time into music, and loved to play, and so yeah, for me at that time, it was a perfect transition, because I needed I needed to get out of just living by myself, and like I said, kind of having that support system. So it was really good.
Did he teach you to play guitar?
No,
Or get you to sing along at least?
no, no. I knew that wasn't my thing, and I tried to pick up playing the guitar a few years later when I was playing overseas in Greece, but I gave up pretty soon. My fingers started hurting, and I was like, no, this is not for me.
So no regrets having chosen OSU over
No,
the other school at all,
no.
even from the get go.
Yeah, no. I feel so fortunate that, and well, I'll close my email too here, because I'll start getting some beeping. Um, I'm extremely grateful that I ended up at Oklahoma State. And that's one thing when I think back. When you're in Kansas City, University of Kansas is the big school. Like, everyone's a KU fan. I feel like everyone in that whole city has gone to KU. So that year in Kansas City, really, I became a KU fan, and so I always felt like there's no way I'm going to be able to play at this school, right? They're just too good. I'm not going to get enough minutes, and so I remember that I had an assistant coach from KU contacted me at some point during this whole process and said that, would you be interested coming into KU? And I turned it down, and I said, I want to go to Oklahoma State, because that's I feel like at the time I felt like that was more my level, and now looking back, we ended up being on the same level as KU almost every year I was there, right? And then coming, and we beat them at home by 40, and yeah, it was a pretty good. It was a great experience to come to a school that maybe a few years before, yeah, they'd gone to Final Four in '96, but a few years before I got there, they were in the middle of the pack in Big 12, and they weren't, going to the tournament every year. So coming in, playing with a great group of guys, Desmond Mason, Doug Gottlieb, Joe Atkins, Adrian Peterson, all these guys that I got to play with for a couple of years, and having that success of going to the tournament every year, being at the top of Big 12. I'm so grateful and thankful for that experience, and it was a great time.
How did you pick number 12, or did you get to pick it?
It was always my number. So when I first started playing when I was 10, my first jersey that I basically was given was number 12, and ever since, I've always tried my hardest to have number 12, and almost every year I've had number 12. There's a couple of years in Europe, maybe 1 or 2 years, that I couldn't have number 12, but for the majority, with the Swedish national team, I had 12. Oklahoma State in high school, I did not have 12 because they didn't have those numbers, but yeah, it's always been my number. It's stuck with me.
Well, how was Coach Sutton as a coach in your early days?
He was so I say this to everyone, there was two different Coach Suttons. There was one off the court and there was one on the court, right? And starting with the one on the court, he always said, as soon as you step inside these four lines, it's all business. No goofing around, no playing around. We're here to get better. We're here to focus. We're here to work hard. And so I think that's the Coach Sutton that most people that just see him on TV or saw him on the side of the court with that frown on his face. That's who they connect with, right? That's who they think he is, and he was very, very, very tough on the basketball court. He was extremely attention to details was very important to him, and I feel like that's something I just habits, and I learned so much from him when it came to habits and little things with basketball, of angles to set screens, or things to think about moving without the ball. He was very very picky about those things. And in other teams where I played, you play and play and play up and down, and there's a lot of mistakes that happens, and you just kind of have the flow, the practice keep going. He would stop even the smallest mistake. He was all about perfection, and he would correct it. And I think that really it just boils down to habits and just doing the right thing over and over and over and over until you do it the right way. And so that was all on the court. And great basketball coach, great basketball mind, taught me a lot of things from that sense. Off the court, he was a human being like everyone else, and he really cared about his players, and not just his players. He cared about the staff and everyone that was around the team. And I always felt he was joking around with us in the locker room, and very easy to talk to. Always very approachable. They had us check in at the office every day just to kind of make sure, that everyone was going to class and everything. So in the morning before, we had to always go in and check in with the coaching staff. And that was, I think, a good way for him to stay connected with the players on a more personal level, and not just see your practice and that's it. So yeah, great from that sense as well.
Well, from the grade standpoint, did you, as Dr. Middlebrooke was there, or still is, for that matter, anything to say about her?
So I got to meet her, or I got to see her again last month when I came back, and we spent quite a bit of time. And I mean, she's just amazing. I don't know. We can go on for hours talking about her, how much she meant to the team, and just from a support system, and not just on the academic level, but just on a personal level too. And I think, obviously when the plane crash happened, and she took, I think, a bigger role in that as well. But she was also someone that, players could come and talk to if they had issues with coaches or basketball, whatever it might be. She was always someone that would, listen to you and give great advice. And so, she, I was a pretty good student. She didn't have to worry too much about me. I was going to class and all those things. So I never had to, have any do better talks with her. But but yeah, I mean, just an amazing person. It was great to see her again last month when I came back.
I understand some would call her mom.
Yeah.
Did they?
Probably more the kids that were not going to school or were not going to class, because she would drop the hammer on them, right? And so she was tough. She wanted to make sure that and I think she had a great relationship with the Coach Sutton too, where it was kind of understood that she needed help making sure that everyone was going to class, getting their grades, and and a lot of kids that age just. They come with the mindset that they're going to play basketball and that's it, right? And to get them to understand the importance of graduating, the importance of getting a good grade and just go learning. I mean, that's the whole point. I've always looked at this as academics is number one, and basketball is a bonus that you get as part of it, right? So, now with the whole discussion about NCAA and paying players, and I felt like I got a free education, and that meant the world to me to have that and fall back on that, and so yeah, she did a great job keeping everyone in line for sure.
I would think there would be some lessons on time management.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Because we would have, we would have morning practice. Either we would lift weights, or we would have some kind of shoot around or shooting practice in the morning, and then she was extremely good. When she sat down with each student, we had to plan the classes, right? So we had to kind of decide, all right, what classes are you going to take this semester? When are you going to take them? Are you going to take the 7 a.m. one or the 9:15 one? Because if we have a gap here, that's when you can go and do your shooting. And then so it was a puzzle trying to figure everything out, right? And she was integral. I think had played a big part of that. And now I don't think I thought about it back then as much as I realize it now, that was such a important part of of all the student athletes succeeding is having structure, and because you have so many things going on. You have basketball, you have this, and then study hall. When are we going to do that? And so all those things combined, she helped with that, and that was amazing.
See, how would that manage that when you're on the road? I mean,
Yeah, and I mean, and I think that's one of the big reasons why we flew with those private airplanes, is because it allowed us to leave the night before. Basically, we would practice. Sometimes we would leave midday, come to, let's say, Ames, Iowa, or wherever it was, and we would have maybe a shorter practice at their gym. But a lot of times we would practice in Stillwater, and then we would fly at night, and then get there, and then just play the game the next night, fly back home. So we would only really miss one day of class uh, for any road game, and so, but there were times, right, when we had to be gone for more than just one day, and yeah, they would, like I said, they would set up specific hours during the day when they would be doing homework or studying or whatever it was, and so it's she was definitely part of organizing and structuring that as well.
and that was before virtual classes.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
changed somewhat, I understand, for the last year or two.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Okay, do you remember your first time walking out onto the court as an OSU Cowboy?
I do not. It's a good question. It's so interesting when you think about just memories, the things, and even when we get into the plane crash later, some of the things that are extremely strong in your memories, and some that aren't, and some things it doesn't make sense why you remember that, and some things you wish you remembered more. But yeah, I don't remember my first year as a freshman. I played about 15 minutes per game, but I was definitely a reserve coming off the bench and kind of learning the system, and just trying to improve. I wasn't a difference maker at the time, and so um, I think it was just at the time. I mean, even that was when Gallagher was smaller, right? When it just held the 6,500 people. But I remember those first. I do remember the experience of playing in front of the fans at Gallagher Iowa that first year. It was, and that's what I mean. It was probably a good thing that I was a reserve, because I was just so nervous and watching, taking it all in. But
It
yeah,
used to get really rowdy.
oh yes, oh yeah, yeah. I can't remember if it was my freshman or sophomore year, but we actually lost to Florida Atlantic at home, and we had I don't know how many home games we had won in a row, non-conference games, and it was a big upset. And yeah, it's a little bit embarrassing that I was part of that. I think it might have been my freshman year, but yeah, Coach Sutton was not very happy about that. But that was I guess a bad experience, but there's also a lot of great experiences from all those years. But I think that the big thing was with the new arena. When basically it was the same arena, and just up. They just built up, and I think that created such an awesome atmosphere, and just the noise level was amazing. But yeah, it was still a little bit different from just the barn to when they made the big Gallagher Iowa. It's two
And
different.
do you recall OU games being the loudest, perhaps?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's I I think just Bedlam. I mean, they all talked about Bedlam and how important those games were, and going to Norman and playing them, kind of the same thing. But yeah, I mean, when you have students that are camping out the night before and putting up tents and I remember, I think that's one memory I have when you came to practice the night before the game and you see tents set up, and you're like, whoa, this is they're actually going to be here all night, and that was pretty exciting. And it wasn't only for OU games, that was for sure when we played OU, but it was for
Right.
other games as well. So.
Well, do you remember the first time you fouled out, or did you foul out any?
No, those things I don't remember.
Okay,
I'm
that's
sure
fair enough. Fair enough.
I'm sure I fouled out several times, but I
That's
yeah, I don't
Those were
remember.
learning moments, I guess.
Yes, yes. And
Well,
but sometimes fouling out is it's good to use. Depending on the situation, it's good to use your five fouls. So as long as I didn't use them in a bad way, then I guess that's a good thing.
that's true. Well, then some highlights. So since let's not talk about bad things. Let's do
Yeah,
some of your
yeah.
highlights. What do you do
So
remember?
yeah, I think obviously the sophomore year when we went to Elite Eight, I definitely feel like that was a big highlight. It was such a neat experience to. It, I would say actually playing in the NCAA tournament all 4 years. I mean that to me it was that feeling of when Oklahoma goes from winter to spring, and that March. I know it's March now and it's still cold, but when you start getting into April and that you get that spring feeling, it's a special feeling, and that was always March Madness time. That was that playoff time, right? And so uh, being able to go to the NCAA tournaments all 4 years was a great experience. And then my sophomore year, we went to the Elite Eight. So we started out. We played in Buffalo, New York, the first round, and because we played in Buffalo and then we won those two games, went to the Sweet 16, and that was going to be in Syracuse, New York. So instead of flying all the way back home, we actually stayed in New York for that week and practiced. We got to go to Niagara Falls. Coach took us on a few little trips like that. Um, I actually I didn't have my Swedish passport at the time, and we crossed over the border to Canada. But I made it safely back into the U.S. So that was good. But uh, talking about school, right, and studying on the road, and so that was, I remember, an integral part. That yes, we were so in March Madness and playing the next, and we were just on cloud nine, getting ready for the next game. But we also knew that we had to focus on schoolwork, right? And so that's where that structure came in, with making sure we had study hall and all those things. But that whole month, it feels like, was just a great experience, and to come out there and play in the Syracuse Dome, that stadium takes, I don't know, 80,000 people for football, and they had split it in half and put bleachers. So I think for basketball, it still took about 40,000 people. But just remember, running out on the court when we played Florida in the Elite Eight, and it's the crowd, the crowd noise when it hit you. It was almost like it was delayed 2 seconds because it was so big and so far away, and so that was a great experience. I think that I've talked about this before with January 27th and everything that happened that night, and obviously the rest of that the season after that. But when we played Missouri 9 days later, and that first game back, and we had a tough game and we won that game, and we played a great game. That was a great experience for me, just because everything that we had gone through to be able to come out and play basketball again. I say this to everyone. We're all, when you have a team, everyone's coming from different backgrounds, and different cities, different areas. I'm all the way from Sweden. You have people from Texas, Oklahoma, you name it, Missouri. And so we're all there to play basketball, and that's our common denominator that we were there for. And so after this happened, I think that being able to come together and play and do what we're supposed to do, be there together, I think that was great for us. So that game was definitely a highlight in that regards, because it was just such a relief to play basketball again and to win. And I'm trying to think other positive memories of. I mean, there's so many. There's so many. But yeah, I definitely think that Elite Eight run in my sophomore year was one of the bigger ones for sure.
Okay. Well, since we talked a little bit about that game, first game after the crash, let's just go ahead and get into that day.
Yeah.
Take us through January 27th, 2001 for you.
Yeah. So we had played. We played in Colorado, right? So that was always, it, it was always a tough trip going to Colorado for many reasons. And back then, you played. It was the Big 12 was divided into North and South. So the South, we played home and away every year. So we would play Texas home and away every year. The North, you kind of alternated every year. So basically, we would go to Colorado every other year. Mm-hmm. So my freshman year, we had gone to Colorado. And I just remember that game. There are a couple of reasons. One is the altitude. So it's a tough place to play in just because of the air. Mm-hmm. But also there's that trip when we flew to Boulder my freshman year. It was a really bumpy flight as well. And it was very, bad weather and just a lot of, it was very bumpy. It was an uncomfortable trip. I remember that. And that was kind of the known thing, right? Is that anytime you go play in Colorado, in Boulder, is the trip is tough. And so we had gone there and we had played, and we had not played very good. We didn't play very good that game. Coach got into us after the game. It was a Saturday, and then we were pretty upset after the game. I remember. So my oldest sister, she actually lived in Denver at the time, and so she had moved there in the mid 90s, and she married her husband, who also was Swedish, but he had lived in the U.S. for many, many years. And so they were involved with the Swedish American Chamber of Commerce. And so they had actually invited 20 or 30 Swedish people from Denver to come watch the game. And so it was kind of, it was disappointing because we lost the game, but I got to see my sister, which didn't happen too often, and so that was a good experience. But then we got on a plane, we flew home, and I remember that Coach Sean Sutton, he had told me, I think before we left, that we wanted to get together the next morning. We were going to be off from practice, but we needed to get together some of the players just to talk through some things, because we just hadn't been playing very good for the past couple of games. And so we had to kind of, get back to work and talk about what we could do to improve our play. And I was on one of the bigger jets that took off. I can't remember the order of how planes took off, right? But there was a couple of planes obviously that got us home a little bit faster. And all I remember, going back once again to these small memories of things from that night. You don't remember everything, but there are very distinctive certain memories that you have. That when we landed, I do remember one pilot stayed in the cockpit and he was, talking to someone. The other pilot got out and started unloading our bags, and no eye contact, nothing. He just said that one of the planes had to go somewhere else, had technical problems and had to go somewhere else. And that's all I remember. And I knew Nate was on that plane, and so I gave him a call, went straight to voicemail, but didn't think any more of it. We thought maybe they had landed in Kansas somewhere, or just had to go somewhere else. It was just, what a bummer that they had to do that. It's would delay just coming home on a Saturday night. And so then I went home, and I was dating a woman at the time, and so we went to dinner with some of her friends in their apartment complex where they lived. And like I said, once again, little things that you remember. We're over at her friend's place. We're watching Duke, Maryland. They played at night, and there was actually the game that year when Duke was down 10 points with a minute to go and came back and won that game. So it was one of those like certain memories that really just stick with me. But then almost simultaneous, we got a knock on the door, and then I got a call from Sean Sutton, and who just told me what had happened and asked everyone to go back to the basketball office as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and then I got several other calls from some teammates. I think Jason Keep called me, and after that, it's just shock, right? I mean, they told us what had happened. The plane had crashed. No survivors, and it's really hard to kind of take that in. And yeah, we drove over to the basketball office, and everyone was kind of coming in at the same time, and we were there for the rest of the night, and they kind of set up the players in some of the assistant coaches' offices, and they allowed us to call our families and friends, whoever we felt like we needed to call, just to tell them that we're okay. So I'd already talked to my sister in Denver, because she had found out about it, and she had called my parents in Sweden, which was in the middle of the night, to let them know that I was okay, but what had happened, and then I called a few other people. I remember calling my host mom in Kansas City that I lived with, and some of those things. And then after that, we were there that night. Now afterwards, I know that Coach Sutton was in his office calling all the families and having to tell them the news, which is just a horrible thing to do. And then one of the strongest memories though is, so we went home. And I'm back at the house with JC, who was, our third roommate. It was just me and him. And throughout the night, there had been a lot of people there. Obviously people coming in, wondering what had happened and just being together. But finally, this is probably closer to 2 a.m. now. It was just me and JC, and Coach Sutton stopped by. He went to every single player that night just to check in on him before he went back home. And it was a quick visit, but he just wanted to stop by and make sure we were doing okay. And then we all met as a team again the following morning. But that was a strong memory of and now looking back at it, right, that he went to see every player that night to make sure that we were doing okay. So yeah, that's a surreal day and surreal night, right? But yeah, that's my memory of it.
Okay. And then a couple of days later, they had the memorial service.
Yeah,
Do you remember anything in particular about it?
yeah, so yeah, the following day, I know that and we met every day going up to that, right? And Suzanne Burks, who's the school counselor, I remember her, and I actually met her last month when I went back too, which was awesome. But she was really huge for us, of just getting us together, talking, dealing with it, not having anyone being by themselves or anything like that. But yeah, I believe that the memorial was on the 30th or the 31st. It must have been 3 or 4 days after. And it was an emotional event for sure. It was the first time we got to see all the families too, and but I don't have a lot of memories. That time, I would say from that day after the 27th and the next few weeks, it's a big fog. Certain little memories here and there, but it was hard to when you go through grief like that and shock, it's hard to eat. It's hard. You lose your appetite. It's hard to sleep. Um, we didn't practice for a few days. Some players were trying to get together the next or after a couple of days just to play to get some of our older players. So Desmond Mason, Doug Gottlieb, some of the older players came back and just to be with the team as well. But yeah, it was hard. Our team doctor, I remember making sure that everyone got enough nutrients and it was eating, because it was definitely it was just kind of in a fog, and not something that college students should have to deal with, and it's just a tough experience to go through.
Yeah, and I had wondered at the memorial service if, being from Sweden, did you have to do any interactions with the pilot that was from Sweden,
So
his
I
family?
yes, so I have met him. I think he had only flown with us maybe a couple of times. I didn't know him very well, but I do remember in Boulder, in the hotel lobby, that was one of the first times I actually met him and talked to him a little bit the day before. So I don't know exactly if he had flown with us before, but that was the first time that I remember. Oh, you're from Sweden, and we were actually speaking Swedish, and he had a girlfriend in Oklahoma City, someone. So I know I met her. I did meet his parents. I can't remember if it was the memorial or if it was later. If they came later, I can't remember exactly, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean it's that's also for them what a horrible experience. I mean, he I don't know all the background and history, but he had obviously moved to the U.S. and he had met someone, and that was kind of his new life. But let's see, I think you're
There we go. Okay.
yeah. So we were talking about the Swedish pilot Bjorn, and I didn't know him very well, but I had talked with him, in Boulder for the first time. So we kind of were sitting at the hotel and just kind of just, oh, you're from Sweden too, and then we kind of connected a little bit like that. But yeah, I did meet his parents at some point. I can't remember if it was during the memorial or not, but yeah, it's uh, it was obviously sad for them being so far away too, and yeah, he had kind of started his new life and met someone in Oklahoma and living there, but far away from where they were. So
And I guess you had a week of funerals to attend, which was,
yes, yeah, and I honestly I like I said, that week was just a big fog. I know I went to Nate's. Nate had a memorial in Edmond. I went to Pat Noy's, who had one in Stillwater. We were offered to fly to some of the other ones that were out of state. I didn't go to that. I couldn't. I didn't have the the energy or anything. I was it was some people, and that's the thing that Coach Sutton too. He left it up to each and every one to do what they felt comfortable with. It was not something that we neither one of us had to do, and so um, I I just I was tired. I wasn't eating well. It was just something that I didn't want to do at the time, and it's weird how your mind and body works at that time. But yeah, you're just everyone's dealing with it differently, right? So
sure. And then that first home game was kind of, I don't know, a turning point, if you want to use that
yeah,
wording.
yeah, no, for sure. And I think that we had I can't remember exactly when we started practicing, but those first practices after. So the game was 9 days after, right? So we had maybe started practicing a day or two before the memorial, and then after that. But those practices really was only about getting together as a team and just trying to get some exercise. The practices were not very good. Coach Sutton was not on us like he usually was. It was, I think, just looking back at it, it's just like we're just gonna take it for what it is and just get everyone together, trying to get some exercise going, because that's good for you as well, right? You don't want people just sitting at home not doing anything. So slowly, I think day by day, we got more and more just ready. Like now it's time to move on. And when that game was scheduled and we knew we had something to kind of look forward to, that kind of became our big focus. And like I said before, just coming together as a group, we were all there for one purpose, and it's to play basketball. And so to be able to have something to focus on again and to honor all those guys, I felt like that was a big driver, a big motivation for us to uh, to really have a goal again to set out to, and hey, we're going to go and play this game, and it was a great game. I mean, it was a great experience, great atmosphere. I mean, the whole Gallagher was packed when we came out for just the first warm-ups and standing ovation. I remember, I mean, that's has never happened before like that, and Just an amazing experience, and just the support from the community and the school and students and everyone was amazing that game, and then to play very very hard, play with a lot of energy, and then be successful and win. It was just such a great feeling at that time, and we, like I said, we hadn't been sleeping a whole lot, not hadn't been eating, so I don't know where the energy came from, but it's
Had a little help from above.
yes, exactly.
I was at that game. It was emotional for those of us in the stands
Yeah,
too. Yes,
yeah, yeah, for sure.
I understand you wore Nate's
Yes,
practice jersey, or
yes, exactly. Yeah. So Andre Williams and myself, we decided that we wanted to. Everyone had their own things where they wrote something on their shoes or something like that, and we. Uh, I can't remember exactly how it came about, but because every day we would walk into our locker room and our managers would have, they would, speaking of laundry, they would actually do our basketball laundry for us. So everything would hang there in our lockers, and our practice jerseys and things like that. And so I think somehow that had come about, that it would be a cool way to honor them is to play with their practice jerseys underneath the game jerseys for the rest of the season. And so actually preparing for this, I still have the jersey, and so it was snug. It's so number 11 was Nate's number. We have dedication, discipline, and defense were the three key words for Coach Sutton. And so, I wore those underneath my jersey for the rest of that season, the rest of my senior year, but also when I played overseas in Europe, all the years after, I always had this for every basketball game, which I felt was pretty cool. And it was just a cool thing to remember them by. And Andre did the same thing with Dan Lawson's number 3. And at the time, I can't remember how it came about or who suggested it, but it became just a great reminder. It was a snug fit. It's probably even snugger now than it was then, but it was a snug fit. But it's still it was a cool way to honor them and to remember them for every game.
yeah, it gave you a connection for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
So, and then after that game, did you approach the first away game getting on the plane any differently?
Yeah, so I don't remember. I know that we played Iowa State, and we actually lost in overtime, I think, which was tough. Or no, not Iowa State. We played Nebraska and lost in overtime. Um, I know that for the rest of that season, we flew one big plane, and Coach, he was, once again, he was very uh, he was he wanted to treat everyone the way that they needed to be treated, right? So he offered, hey, if you're not comfortable getting on a plane, we're not going to make you go on a plane. So if you want to drive to the game, you can drive to the game. I actually believe that Jack Marlowe drove with the manager to that game in Nebraska, if I remember correctly, or at least it might have been discussed. But um, yeah, the way I remember is that we flew on big planes, to every game after that. And one thing that has come from this, right, is how travel changed, not just for our school but for NCAA in general now. And then there's rules put in place, not just about planes but buses and minivans and all these things. And so I think that there's always going to be mistakes and things that happen, and the most important thing in life is that you learn from it and try your very very best to make sure that doesn't happen again, right? And so I think that the school, Oklahoma State, has done a great job of that, of making sure that, yeah, it might come at a cost, but this should not happen like this again, right? And so it's but yeah, that's my memory of that next game. The rest of the season, it really only was a month and a half left, right? So we had a month of conference games left, and then we had the NCAA tournament, and it was hard. I remember now looking back at it, and we lost in the first round of that tournament, and it was we were so just exhausted by the time we got to end of March. I think that and every game it was just trying to move forward. When we were playing, we felt like we were playing with a purpose. But I think in the back of our minds, it was just, it was a drain on us for sure. And it was the right thing to do. We wanted to keep playing because that's why we were there. But it was definitely exhausting by the time we got to the end of the season, and I think we all needed that break when the season was over. So,
And did you take a break? What kind of break did you take?
I don't remember, but yeah, definitely
Would
took.
would you
Yeah,
visit home? Would you go back?
I went home every summer. So
Okay.
yeah, when when the semester was done, when classes were out, at end of May, I would go home. I would play with the Swedish national team a lot, and so uh, I played with Sweden quite a bit that summer. We actually went to China to play in the university games in September of 2001, or August, it was August 2001, and then I came back directly from China to start my senior year. But yeah, it was. Like I said, I can't remember exactly those months after the season was over and just finishing up school. I can't remember too much about what happened then.
And then when fall came, before it, they did the dedication to the memorial in
Yeah.
Colorado. Were you here for that?
No, I was not there for that. No, so
Okay.
I was back in Sweden playing at that time. I've been to that memorial several times since my sister lived in Denver many years, but uh, I was not there for that actual. So I actually went back that summer, the first summer. So before the memorial was created, I actually went back to that site because I went to see my sister before I'd gone back to Sweden, and so I did get to go out there and see, and that was surreal too because there's still airplane parts. I mean, this is 4 5 months later, and there's still debris left in the field, and it was obviously marked off, but the landowners let us come on site and just finding little pieces still in the ground. It was a weird feeling for sure, and but yeah, we went back. I took my whole family. We went back there. I don't know, 2018, I think, 4 years ago. So got this, and I've been back there a couple of times. Every time I went to see my sister in Denver, I try to make the drive out there, even if it's out there by an hour, but still, it's worth it.
Right. And then later that fall, I think is when they started the task force for the
Yeah,
team travel task force, and you were a student representative on that.
yeah, yeah.
Recall anything about those?
I don't remember too much. I was part of it a little bit in the beginning, but I wasn't part of it too much
Right.
after that.
Okay.
I honestly can't remember. Uh, just knowing that it was something that the school was and the families all part of it was motivated to just uh, make it better, right? And I think that was a great thing, and it led to a lot of changes that were positive for everyone. So, but I don't
And
remember.
beyond OSU.
Yeah,
And beyond OSU.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So the game season's going along, and then February, the first anniversary, when they dedicated the memorial in the arena. You talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every year that date, it's been meaningful, right? It's a way to just look back at memories. I don't my senior year. I think that coach probably kept that as much away from us as possible, and not in a negative way, but still wanted us to still focus on basketball and focus on the game. Obviously, the media attention and all those things were big, but I actually don't think that we as a team even really were part of any of uh, the memorial that happened around that game. So
Okay.
yeah, I remember my senior year was a lot of ups and downs, but it was a way in a sense to kind of move forward. There's 4 or 5 new players on the team, right? And we still had that unity of some of the guys that was there the year before. Uh, but it's we try to move forward as best we could, but it's I I don't have a lot of, and once again, going back to strong memories of certain things, I don't have a lot of memories from that senior year, which is kind of weird. But
Yeah.
it's just, it's just how it is,
Worried about what's coming next, I guess. So they have some kind of acknowledgement of every year at the anniversary time. It's varied from what that has been from year to year.
Yeah.
But you mentioned you came to this last one.
Yep.
Was that the first one you've been back for?
It was, yeah. It was the first time I was back for that specific one. Playing overseas for many, many years, obviously I couldn't come back. I came back the year after I graduated. I was back over Christmas. We had a Christmas break, and when I played in Italy, and then I brought my wife in 2008 or 2000, yeah, I think 2007 or 2008. We went to Stillwater for the first time, but that was in April, so the season was over. And then I didn't come back because we moved back to California in 2013. So we lived over in Sweden for many years and then came back. We moved to California in 2013. But then my job at the time, working for Stryker, I was on call, working a lot, and it was very hard for me to ever take any time off. So the first time really that I got to come back was in 2018, and it was the alumni game that they put on. So this was end of February. So I got to bring my kids, and we got to show them campus and show them where I played and where I lived and everything. And then this year, I just brought my two boys. My wife and daughter stayed home, and then same thing. We've been invited to this alumni game that was going to be end of February, but I couldn't come that weekend. And then I was actually talking with Doug Gottlieb, and he said, I'm going to try to go to the Remember the 10 game. And I was like, well, that's a great idea. I'd rather do that because I never been back for that. So that was an awesome experience, and I got to meet so many people that I haven't seen for 20 years, and family members and just Marilyn Middlebrook, Susie Burks, like I mentioned before, a lot of people that meant a lot from that time that I was there that I just haven't seen in so long. So, one thing, Larry Reese sent me a bunch of pictures that was from that day. And one thing he said is like, the best thing about all these pictures are all the laughs that I see. Everyone's laughing and having a good time. And I really felt, it's been 20 plus years now, right? But to be able to come back and just enjoy each other's company and talk about memories and it's moving on with life as best as they can, right? So
is that when you got the photo that's over your shoulder?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I can bring this down. So I was when I went back in 2018, I've stayed in touch with Nate's parents, Ann and Zane, and his sisters, Sarah and Drew, and they just, so I got to see them this trip when I went back, but they just recently moved from their house in Edmond to be closer to Sarah and Drew, where they live. And so Anne had all these pictures and memorabilia and everything. And so we're kind of going through boxes. And so she had two of these. So this is from, it's a little bit difficult to see, but this is from when we played Iowa State a couple of weeks before that plane crash. And it's always been one of my favorite pictures just because you have Nate right here who's on the bench just jumping up and down. I'm hiding behind here, but I'm standing on the ground. But Andre Williams, he was my shot blocker, so he's taken care of that. And but it's just kind of fun to see. There's a lot of guys in here. You got Nate over here. You got Bill Tegans and Kendall Durfee over on the side as well. And so just a cool picture. Yeah, Dan Lawson is in here as well on the bench right there. And so
okay,
it's pretty cool to. A cool memory, but more so it just, for me, it always has represented who Nate was and how he was always very energetic, always wanted the best for the team, and just to see him jumping up on the bench and that was typical Nate, right? And cheering us on and pushing us and always trying to get us to do better. So I love that picture.
And he occasionally got in the game, didn't he?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he did.
And I remember fans chanting,
Yeah,
for him to
yeah.
get to go in.
And you know, the funny thing was that a lot of times with walk-ons and they don't get to play in close games, so they only get to come in when, you know, we're up by 20, 30 points and the game's almost over. And then you come in the game and everyone's kind of laughing and trying to get him the ball to shoot and wanting him to score, right? But Nate was always, for him it was serious. It was, basketball was serious, and he didn't want, you know, he didn't want people laughing or taking it. It was serious, whether we were up 20 or 30. So for him, it was all about, well, if he got a good shot, he would take it. But we were going to keep playing our offense and keep doing the right things, and so I really like that about him too. How I remember his first points that he scored. You know, I've seen a video of it, but at first points he scored, and everyone just goes crazy and celebrating, and he's just jogging back home with a, you know, serious look on his face, like, all right, let's play defense. And so it was pretty cool to see that it didn't faze him that he just scored his first, you know, college points in his career, but it was pretty cool.
Cool. Okay, and then since that let's back up then. And we graduated in 2002. Let's just run us through what happened after that with you.
Yeah, so I stayed in that summer. I got to play summer league with the Houston Rockets. So I was playing a little bit with them, but then I knew I wasn't going to make it in the NBA because the draft came and I wasn't at the final draft camp, and so I started getting some offers in Europe, and I got an offer in Italy. So moved there outside of Milan, and then I played in Italy, Spain, 2 years in Greece, and then 2 more years in Spain, and then 4 years total, I believe, in Sweden. And so I retired in 2011. So I played 9 years total, I think, out after college, and retired the season my oldest son was born. So my son was born January 2011, and then I retired that season and started working a little bit in Sweden. And then in 2013, my wife, who is from Southern California, we decided, we had lived in Sweden now for 6 years total, and we decided that let's move to California. And we moved there in 2013, almost 9 years ago, and we're still here. So.
Okay. And you have been back to Stillwater a time or two.
Yes. Now, my oldest son, who's now 11, his big thing, obviously, he wants our next trip to be a football game. So we're looking at, because we've never been, you know, we haven't been back to a football game since I was in college. So we might haven't been to the new stadium since it was rebuilt, and so hopefully we can make it sometime in the fall.
Do they understand somewhat the reasoning why you came for this last trip?
Yeah, we definitely. I've you know, talked to them about it as I've gotten older too, and you know, every year with when that date comes up, and there's you know, I whether I read articles or look at some videos or things like that, and so I fill them in, and they came. You know, we went to the memorial in Colorado as well, and so they've seen all that, so it's been pretty cool.
I think they had on at the game, this last game, they had on the shirts.
Yeah.
Remember the 10 shirts?
Yeah. They were given. All of us that came as part of the celebration was given these shirts that, I guess they were designed by Eskimo Joe's, so they kind of had that Eskimo Joe's theme on it, and then all the faces of the 10 on the back and their names. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
And then they have the Remember the 10 run.
Yeah. That I haven't been part of because it's in the summertime, right? It's in
April typically.
April, typically. Yeah. So that's been a little bit difficult.
That would have been hard, yes.
Yeah.
They do have a virtual one now, I think, because of COVID. The last couple of years, they've also had that as an option.
That would actually, yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea. I can do that here for sure. So.
Well, how do you think OSU's done at keeping the promise?
I think they've done a great job. I mean, it's it's something that when you say it right, it could easily just be something you say, and then different people come in, and some people that's connected to the program leaves, and then everything just kind of goes away. And so uh, the fact that there's still a lot of people involved, and that's once again why I think things like this is also very important, because at some point no one's going to be around anymore, right? And it's just so it is important to continue the memory, and yeah, I'm really impressed, and I think that I was impressed, and just how Coach Boyden and brought up the whole team, and making sure even OU, their coach, go by the memorial afterwards. I mean, it's, if you think about it, it's been 20, 21 years. It's a lot. Most of the guys are playing now were born in 2001, and so to think about that is still being celebrated as a very important event in school history. I think it just speaks to the school and the history, and the family feel of the community and the school, and I think that's it's really nice.
Well, since you lived with Nate and knew him well, how do you think he would have liked to be remembered?
I think Nate, and I remember thinking of this, how this is going back to that same time frame when all this happened. I remember just feeling so, it just felt like it was so unfair, right? And at the time, I was just thinking, 5 years from now, like what would he have been doing 5 years from now? And he's going to miss out on everything that we're doing, over the next 5 years. And it's so, as human beings, we're just so focused on what we're doing here on Earth, right? And so I've had a lot of people tell me, it's like, he's on to bigger and better things, and I think that's that's an important reminder that they're not missing out on anything. They're not losing out on anything, even though that's the feeling we have as humans living on this earth. But when I think of Nate, is his work ethic, number one. He was putting in the work no matter what, and especially taking on that challenge, right? So he always, I think, always wanting to be challenged, not settling for what you're comfortable with, but coming as a walk on to Oklahoma State, not Oklahoma, where his sisters both went and his families are all Sooners. He went to the rival, and to basically come to a school where, yeah, he had some friends here, but a lot of his friends still went to OU, right? And so getting out of your comfort zone, working hard for your goals that you set for yourself, and then generally just being a very nice person. I preach that to my kids now, and in today's world and everything, just be kind to one another. And that's one thing I really feel like he was never mean. He never said a bad word to anyone, or just talked down to anyone. He was a great friend. He was a great man, a great human being, and yeah, it's that's how I remember him. The hard work ethic, really challenging yourself to get out of your comfort zone, and just being nice to everyone.
Good lessons for all of us.
Yes,
and current
sure.
generation included.
Yeah,
Yes,
sure,
yes.
sure.
Well, do you have a favorite memory from your time here on campus? Doesn't necessarily have to be basketball related, but it can be.
Uh, Let me think. Yeah, I mean, basketball.
What did you
It's
miss most when you left? Maybe that's another way of asking.
uh, it's funny now, when I came back with my boys, we were there Friday night, Saturday night, then flew home Sunday, and so I had, you always have to think about food. So I was like, well, because when we were there in 2018, we tried to get to Eskimo Joe's, but it was 2 hour wait after the game or whatever, so we didn't make it. So I made sure on Friday night that we went to dinner at Eskimo Joe's, and they got some cheese fries, and I haven't had cheese fries in 20 years, and that was a great experience. And then I really, really wanted to go and get some Oklahoma barbecue, and so we went to Bad Brad's after the game, on the way out. Different location now than what it used to be, but yeah, if there's one thing I love food, and so Oklahoma food is definitely something. But once again, just being on campus, and it's interesting. My oldest son was just saying, I was like, it's so cool how the basketball arena, everything is in brick, and the buildings, everything looks the same, right? And to see that, to hear that from an 11-year-old, that's the thing they notice, I think is pretty cool, because it's all part of creating the identity of the school, right? And I think that's something I really like about Oklahoma State in general, is that's what you associate with Oklahoma State. And so, but once again, going back to what I said earlier about Stillwater as a town, as a community, that it is Oklahoma State University, and that's a big part of that town, and that community is not just a school in a big city, or Stillwater is Oklahoma State University, and I think that's a great memory that I have of it.
Next time that you bring your children, you should come into the library
For sure,
and take them up to the 4th floor and let them look out over the formal
Yes.
gardens and see the student union and stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
No, yeah, it's
There's not as many books as there were when you were here. They've moved some of those out, but it's still a nice place.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Hopefully this fall, we can all make it. If they're big, because I went to high school in Kansas City. I became a Kansas City Chiefs football fan, so my kids automatically became Chiefs fans too. So the hope is to combine a weekend of going to Oklahoma State Saturday game, and then driving up to Kansas City to see some of my friends there and watch the Chiefs game. So we'll see if we can make that happen, if the timing works.
Yeah, and then at some point you'll have to try a baseball game. The new
Yes.
baseball stadium is quite impressive.
I heard that, and that's, I mean, that's another part, right? There's so many new buildings, which has just been amazing how everything has been developed, and but yeah, baseball. I drove by it, but haven't been inside it yet. So it's pretty cool.
Pretty nice. So you took a leap of faith coming on down the road, I-35 to OSU, and no regrets.
Oh yes,
No
100%.
regrets.
Yeah, I'm very happy. I'm happy about Kansas City, how that happened. I loved living there, and then to be able to stay in that same area and come to Oklahoma State was it's been a big part of my life. I lived in a lot of different places all over the world, and obviously Sweden is what I still consider home. Now Southern California is my home. So but Oklahoma is always going to have a dear place in my heart, just because of where I went to school, the degree, the scholarship that I got, right, and being able to play basketball for Coach Sutton. Obviously, the plane crash played a big part of creating memories that maybe I wouldn't have had otherwise, but it's also been a lot of positive that came out of that. So some people might say like, oh, when a negative event like that happens, you have regrets to come in there in the first place. I feel the opposite, right? Because even though it was a horrible, tragic event, the friendships and the connections and everything that's come from it has been amazing.
So when they sang the alma mater song at the end of the game, you were here. You swayed with them.
So what's interesting is that when I played, the team was not. We never stayed out there. I don't know when they changed this, and so I was telling my kids this. I was like, it's funny, like, because now they stay out, and I think that's a great tradition that I wish we had when I played. But yeah, we always went off the court after the game, and so I'm happy that has changed for the better too, because that would have been a cool thing to be part of too.
Well, win or lose, they do it. So
yeah.
Sometimes happier than others, of course.
Yeah, I know, but that's a good thing, because it's part of the culture and the family.
Well, did they do the waving wheat in football when you were here? At least
they did. Yeah.
So that goes back further than that. Then okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean the fan. I was telling my sons, there are all these things that when they shoot free throws that the crowd is doing, and my son was asking me, he's like, I don't know exactly what they're saying or what they're doing, and I was like, son, I don't know either, because when I played, I don't know, I didn't know what was going on, so I heard Orange Power every now and then, but other than that, I was focused and zoned in on the game. So, it was fun to be back, in the crowd and be part of that atmosphere instead of being on the court.
Did the boys get their picture with Pistol Pete?
Not Pistol Pete. We got a lot of different pictures, but yeah, that will be the next thing.
That'll be the next thing.
Yeah.
Well, we've covered everything on my list. Is there anything that we need to that I don't know to ask about?
I don't think so. I think we did cover everything.
Do you keep up with some of your teammates?
Yes, Andre Williams. So he was there at the game. So I hung out with him for a little bit, which was nice. Um,
He
uh,
had read that poem at the
yeah,
memorial. That's what I remember from the memorial. How he had the strength to stand up and do that, just beyond my, yeah.
yeah. I mean, I've seen pictures of myself and Jason Keep and some of the, like during the memorial. I mean, you're devastated, and so yeah. I don't know how I could have done anything that day because that was tough. But yeah, I mean, it's still fun. Maurice Baker, I met him 2018 for the alumni game, and I got to see him again. Stay in touch with Doug Gottlieb because he lives out here in Southern California a little bit too. So, and some of the I made a decision a few years ago to get off social media completely with Facebook and Instagram. So back then it was you had a little bit more, awareness of what people was doing. But that's why it's good to come back every now and then and to see people in person.
Are your children interested in basketball?
Oh yeah,
Playing basketball?
yes,
Are they?
yes. Oh
Okay.
yes, they want to go to Oklahoma State, so we'll see.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah,
Maybe that's a good way to end then, huh? Go
yes.
Pokes.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. Hopefully, we can get some more Cowboys in the family when it's time for college. So,
Okay. At least get a campus visit.
yes, for sure,
Yes.
for sure,
Okay.
for sure.
Well, if there's nothing else, I'll say thank you very much for sharing. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you.